I am delighted to be here with all of you. And I want to first say that the question of how are you was really meant to help you to be in touch with the fact that none of us are good at this moment in time. And so, Candace, if you can bring back the graphic, that would be helpful.
Yes, once.
So I just wanted to say that none of us are good at this point. And whenever I say hello to somebody and they'll say, how are you? I always say that I'm as good as can be expected given all of what's going on around us. And so I want to encourage you to think about how you're really doing and make a commitment at this point to talk to people, not just today, but as long as we're in this situation. It's important to be able to be mindful. I know that some of you have heard the term mindfulness, and basically it's talking about the idea of being in touch with what's going on inside of you. So your mind, your body, and your feelings, being consciously connected on a regular basis so that it can help to calm you some. And what we're going to talk about as soon as the graphic is back up so that everybody can see. Candace, are you able to do it?
I thought we were just now. Let's try that again.
Oh, okay. I can see it now. Can everybody else see it?
Okay, here we are.
All right. So I want you to, first of all, be in touch with how you're feeling. And secondly, I want you to understand what trauma is about. And this is called intersectional trauma. I did not create this chart. There is an organization that is listed at the bottom of it that I want to be able to credit for the chart, and it'll be a part of the resources that you'll get. But I want you to think of it first in terms of historical trauma. It's talking about post-traumatic slave syndrome. What that is the concept that all Black people carry 400 years worth of history that includes slavery and lynchings and Jim Crow and unfair treatment and lots of unpleasant things that's happened to Black people and Black bodies. That's the historical piece of what we carry. The next thing I want to talk about is the personal trauma. And I want you to keep these in mind because we're going to end up talking about the pandemic. So the personal trauma is basically any trauma that you've experienced personally. Maybe you were, you grew up in a household that was disruptive. There was abuse in terms of physical abuse or emotional or psychological abuse. Or you could have been a victim of incest while you were growing up. Or later in life, you could have been raped. Or you could have had dreadful things happen at work where you were constantly being bombarded with things that indicated that you weren't good enough. Or it could have happened in school where people made fun of you in some way. Or many different things that could have happened that caused you to have trauma. And then the other part of trauma is about having lost somebody. Maybe you recently had somebody die prior to the pandemic. Maybe you were still grieving from the loss of somebody that really mattered to you. Maybe you had a divorce. Maybe you were laid off or fired from your job inappropriately or unnecessarily. Maybe it had to do with racism, a variety of different things of that nature. And then you move on to vicarious trauma. That's the trauma that we're experiencing right now. With the trauma where we look at the news and you see and hear lots of unpleasant things that's happened. And you also witness the recent shootings, but it's not just so recent because it's been going on for a very long time. And basically, vicarious trauma is there on a regular basis. And then we talk about the pandemic. And so in essence, the pandemic is impacting everyone, but when you come to the pandemic, you come with your special history, and it's all piled on top of each other. So when you're questioning, how am I feeling? It's important to realize that oftentimes you're feeling anxious or discomfort having to do with how much trauma do you bring to the table already. Trauma doesn't really go away. It exists in a quieter space, but it's there and it gets kicked up at the point that something dreadful happens. And so with the idea of the global pandemic, prior to the global pandemic, we had Sandy. And that put lots of us in a traumatic state. Well, at the point that this happens, it impacts everybody based on how they were impacted by something else that happened. So I want to, Candace, we can now go back to the way that we were.
All right.
Okay. So before we start to talk about how trauma impacts us in terms of the pandemic, I want to talk about how trauma impacts us and our bodies as Black people. And so research shows that women, Black women, between 49 and 52 are biologically 7 years older than a white woman that's the same age. I'm going to say that again because this is really important information. That Black women at 49 years old to 52 years old are 7.5 years older biologically than white women. And so the only answer for what that trauma is about is race. And so we're talking about race and racism and how it impacts our bodies. And the other thing is that racism causes chronic stress, and chronic stress produces cortisol in women, Black women especially. And what it does is it adds to the idea of people who are anxious. They oftentimes are not, they're depressed often, and it leads to obesity, heart disease, and breast cancer. An excessive amount of cortisol in the body. And that often is a result for women. I know that some of you may not be old enough to remember, but Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman to be elected to Congress And she was also the first Black woman to run for president. She talked about, and that was in 1972, she talked about the idea of the twin evils. And the twin evils had to do with racism and sexism. And so life has changed some, but some things have taken on a different shape, but it's still there. And so that's a part of what it is that causes Black women to carry stress, and it impacts their body differently. Now we can move on to how racism and disrespect and basically maltreatment impacts Black men. Of all the living people, Black men live shorter lives than any other people. And that has to do with also the fact that there is studies that currently show that Black men oftentimes experience varying degrees of disrespect. And of course, recent things can help us to see the disrespect that's given to Black men that we all witness in a vicarious kind of way. And that creates, the studies show that it creates some disorder within the cells that causes inflammation and ultimately leads to things like heart attack and basic inflammation within the organization, within the body. Now that's especially important, and I want you to keep those thoughts because in essence, these are the things that we're dealing with as we enter the pandemic. And so in essence, Black bodies that are impacted by trauma in a variety of ways. I want to say one last thing about trauma. And so most Black people, I would actually say all, but some would say, oh no, not me, but most Black people carry a certain amount of anxiety with them. It's sort of a low-level anxiety because you never know when something's gonna happen, especially at work and also in the news. And I was thinking about the fact that when Obama was elected, lots of people were ecstatic about him, but there was a lot of anxiety about the fact that somebody might harm him in some way. And there was lots of pain about the disrespect that he received as president. That is vicarious trauma still, that even in the midst of great joy, there is this underlying pain and anxiety that exist. And so it's important that when you're hearing people talk about the pandemic and blaming Black and brown people for the fact that they are at fault for having greater impact, being greatly impacted by the pandemic, it's important to recognize that these social factors lay the groundwork for what it is that happens with Black people and Black bodies. Is there a question or is there something that people are unclear about at this point?
No questions showing up in the chat. And
Okay.
we're still good.
Right. All right, terrific. So what I want to do at this point is to acknowledge that we have 400 years worth of mistreatment and a political environment that really is disrespectful and painful on a lot of levels. But we, as Black folks, are resilient. Still we rise, regardless of whatever has happened. It shows strength as a collective. So what I want to do is to share with you what I describe as a ray of sunshine. And a ray of sunshine is for the purpose of helping you to feel good as we're about to do some deeper work. Can't hear. Okay, thank you. So better days are coming. But in the meantime, we need to take care of ourselves. And we need to be conscious about what needs to be done to survive sheltering in place. All of us struggle at different times with being cooped up for too long, wanting to be able to go outside, wanting to be able to connect with other people. And some of us are fortunate enough to be sheltering in place with somebody, and some of us are alone and sheltering in place alone, and some of us are sheltering in place with too many people. So in essence, it's important to be able to recognize that better days are indeed coming, but we need to strategize for how to manage now. All of us are thinking about, when is this going to be over? What is my life going to be like when this is over? Are other people doing better than me? This is driving me crazy. I want my old life back. And one of the things that we're really, really clear about is that we're not going to get our old life back. That there is no such thing as going back. As a result, there's lots of anxiety. Some of us are drinking too much. Others of us have made too good of friends with the refrigerator. And basically, we need to figure out how to be able to be mindful, present, with regards to how we're feeling, what we're thinking, and what we're doing. And we cannot do those things without being conscious on a regular basis. It feels as though it's difficult to do, but if you're focused on when am I going to get my life back as it was, it's not going to happen. And it only leads to frustration. But the biggest problem that we all have is the fear about dying ourselves and about people that we love dying. And we're not talking about that with each other. We're glued to the TV, to social media. We're focused out there someplace. And basically being conscious about how you're feeling. You can turn the TV off. You know what they're saying. Do you have to hear it 18 times during the course of the day? Do you have to hear it from people who are racist in their presentation? How many times do you have to see things that causes you distress? The replay of a recent murder? Things that come from the White House that upsets you? How many times do you need to see those things? Right now, what we're talking about is surviving. Not just surviving, thriving. How do you thrive despite all of these things that are going on? Resilience is really what we're talking about. What can I do to be resilient? It's important that you, on a regular basis, check in with yourself. Just like we did a little while ago, how are you doing? But instead of asking someone else, you're going to ask yourself, how am I doing? And you're going to check in because you want to be able to know that your body will tell you. If you're tired, sleep. Sometimes we're watching the news or looking at something on social media for the 19th time that's going to make us distressed. Turn off any form of social media or any tablet at least 1 hour before bedtime. Research shows that those lights that come from the tablets or the phone or any of that stuff prevents you from sleeping well. In order to survive, the most important thing is that you're getting proper rest. And I know for me, when I used to listen to the news at night, the 11 o'clock news, I stopped listening after the elections in 2016. I stopped listening because I couldn't sleep afterward. And so I stopped listening to the news. I slept better. I don't listen to the news. Anytime something dreadful is happening, I'll hear about it. I don't need to see it 16 times. It's important that you're conscious about that. If you're sad, cry. There is nothing wrong with tears. Tears soothe your soul. You feel better if you cry. Candace has informed me that someone has a question, and feel free to unmute and take the question.
Sure. So someone who texted me directly wanted to know more about what are some ways that anxiety manifests? What does it look like? Like, how can we detect the signs of anxiety, as you spoke about earlier? And if you have any strategies for how to come back into your body, come back into reality as you notice that you are getting anxious.
Sure. So remember, we started off with talking about the trauma that we carry as Black people, where there is always a small amount of trauma and dis-ease that is sitting with all of us because of our histories, and then your personal histories. So anxiety is what prevents you from relaxing. And this is why it's important to check in with your body. You might feel as though I'm uneasy, so I need a drink. I'm uneasy, so I need some more cookies. I'm uneasy, so let me do something that is not good for me. And I know it's not good for me, but I can't stop doing that something because it soothes me in some way. Most of the time, when you know that you're doing something that's not good for you, you're soothing anxiety. If you didn't do the something, you'd experience the anxiety. And the thing that I want to say is, I often say this to my daughter, and I say it to many people that I work with on a regular basis, and that is that success in life requires that you do things that you don't want to do when you don't want to do them because you want the result. I'll say that again. Success requires that you do things that you don't want to do when you don't want to do them because you want the result. Now, the reason that I mention that is because I don't want to get up and ride my bike. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to be concerned about reading things, learning new things. I'd like to be able to sit on the couch and do nothing. However, if I want the results, I have to do things that I don't want to do. And so what that means is that if you are anxious and you don't want to go to a therapist and you don't want to take medication for anxiety or depression, and you don't want to take your medication for high blood pressure, and you don't want to go to the doctor to follow up on the test that you recently had, it will not lead to the success that you want. One of the things that I recently read during quarantine is some information that said physical activity enhances the brain's ability to function longer over time. Alzheimer's runs in my family. And while I don't want to go to the gym, I don't want to get up and ride my bike, I want my brain working for as long as it possibly can. So it means I do what I need to do. And so in essence, a part of what we're talking about is how important it is that you're in touch with your body, the things that you are hiding from, because anxiety comes from something that's going on that you don't want to see or talk about. And if you don't want to see it, you can't address it. A part of what a therapist does, a therapist is a thought partner, an accountability partner. And basically what I talk about often is that a therapist, therapy is the art of helping people to overhear themselves. The art of helping people to overhear themselves. So if you have dreams for yourself about, I want a new job, I want to be able to move from my apartment, I want to be able to finish school. If you go to the therapist and you say those things to a therapist, they help you to overhear yourself at the point you say, you know, I don't feel like going to school this semester. Gee, instead of saving my money for the new apartment, I think I'm going to buy myself some shoes. So the therapist, as an accountability partner, helps you to overhear yourself. But gee, didn't you mention last week that you wanted a new apartment and that it was coming up and you bought shoes for $400 this week? Wherein if you don't go, you can just feel anxious as you spend the $400 on your shoes. And you're not having anyone help you to hold yourself accountable in the process. And so that your dreams become further and further removed from where you say you want to be. So the pandemic at this point helps us to be able to hear things that we didn't think about before because we were too busy, didn't have time. We're too focused on doing lots and lots of other things. There are lots of rays of sunshine during the pandemic. Now, one of the things is that research, even though it's brand new, it shows that people are starting to think more about how they're spending their lives and what they're actually doing in their relationships, and or what they're doing being without a relationship. So people are starting to think about how they're spending their time, what they want to spend their energy doing going forward. And so there is a strong belief that there will be lots of people who will be leaving relationships that they are quarantined in at this moment, and a lot of people that will be doing something different with the time that they have. I'm told that we only have a small amount of time left, and I want to make mention of the fact that if indeed you're in a situation where you think that the relationship might be abusive, it feels absolutely important to take a look at some of the resources that we have, including a brief test on, is my relationship abusive? And that is extremely important because, in essence, if you're in a situation where you are not being able to be your best self because you have a partner that is basically saying you're not good, it's important to be able to recognize that you're the most important person, and it's important to have connections to people that value you. And sometimes we get stuck in patterns and we continue to go around and around and wait for it to get better the next time. Quarantine allows us the opportunity to examine ourselves and our relationships. I have a couple of things that I want to make sure to say, and that is that, how much time do we have now?
Well, we're going pretty well, Mary. We've got maybe about 10 minutes
Okay.
or so. I want to give people a chance to ask them questions, perhaps.
All right. Well, one of the things, so I'm just going to say this, and then, so it's important to be able to be conscious of the people, the person that you're with. Pay attention to them. Sometimes we've been so busy, we don't have time to do those things, especially if we've been together. You've been together for a long time. Everybody wants to be seen and valued. So it feels important to look in their face, touch people as you go throughout your day from one room to the next. Touch people. Kiss them on their head. Pinch them on their cheek. Pinch their butt. Make nice. Reverend is giving me a thumbs up about pinching on the butt. And basically what we're doing is the idea of doing things to have a nice interaction during the course of your day. And do somebody else's chores, something that you would normally not have as one of your roles, do it for somebody else. And for people who are alone, skin hunger is the major issue that causes people distress. Skin hunger is basically the concept that when you're out, you're going to church, you're going to prayer meeting, whatever, you're working, you're saying hello to people, you're giving people hugs, you're giving them kisses, somebody's doing something to make you feel connected to them, physically connected. When you're sheltering in place alone and you're social distancing, it's extremely difficult. And so some of the resources that are available will talk about those things as well. Anyway, I'll stop there, and please, I'm open to questions, but we want to do a one last ray of sunshine, and then we will do the questions. And the reason for this ray of sunshine is because many of our folks have gone from invisible to essential personnel. And it feels extremely important to recognize that we have folks who should never become invisible ever again. It's important for us to remember that those essential people are the people that are oftentimes invisible. And politically, what has happened is that we've gone from invisible to essential personnel, and it's important that we are conscious so that these people, we, can never become invisible again. Questions from anyone? To also say, while we're waiting for questions, that on my website there are lots of other rays of sunshine where you can click in and get things that are a minute long to 4 or 5 minutes long, because surviving during this time is about making sure that you're doing some things that, excuse me, that causes you to feel good and to break up your day in some way. The other thing I want to say too is that, do we have a question yet?
Not yet.
Okay, the other thing I want to say is the idea of finding a therapist is like finding a mate. Excuse me. You want to find somebody that matches you, that can hear the things that you're struggling with and that you don't have to educate them about. Having a therapist of color at this point means that you don't have to talk about what it means to you to hear the news. And you're always clear about the fact that this person will have a lived experience that understands that 400 years worth of slavery and how it plays itself out. The other thing is that on the resources is also therapists who are LGBTQIA plus affirming. It feels extremely important to have someone that understands your journey rather than somebody that you have to educate. And it doesn't mean that you don't tell the therapist or help the therapist in any way to understand your journey. But it's extremely important that you're not there educating the therapist, because on occasions, there are things that people bring up that I'm not familiar with, and I can educate myself to some degree on it. But at this point in life, you don't want to, and with the trauma that's around us, you don't want to be in a situation where you're going to your friend for advice about something. I often tell my patients when they tell me about the wisdom that someone gave them, I always ask them, does this person have the kind of life that you want for you? And if they don't, why would their wisdom be helpful to you at this point? And so in essence, being a friend and connecting to people is important, and it's not what happens when you get professional help for the things that causes pain.
So I see that we have 2 questions in the queue, and I'm going to ask them together because I think they would go together. It's really about families in this season. So the first question is from Doris Rowley Hoyt, and the second is from Tiana Greene. And question 1 is, how do you recognize anxiety in children? And then the second question is how to handle conflict with partners or other people that you live with during quarantine.
Very good question. And it's also in the resources with a click. And of course, I have a whole bunch of stuff to talk to you about those things, but we don't have the time. But the first thing is about children. It's important to recognize that when kids are bouncing off the wall, they're acting up, they're yelling at each other, they are whining and basically uh, annoying you greatly, it's usually an indication that they're anxious. And so during this time, it feels extremely important that you pay attention to them. Have some, you know how there's a concept about time out? My suggestion is that you have some time in where you spend 10 minutes every day. And if you can't do it every day, every other day. If you have multiple children, you might need to make it every other day. But the goal is to have 10 minutes with each child every day, where they get to spend their time with you, and whatever activity you do will be just for them. You give them your undivided attention. You turn your cell phone off, you look into their eyes, you kiss their hands, you pinch their cheeks, you rub their hair, you let them snuggle next to you, you tell them how precious they are. And that is what helps, because in essence, they look at you and they hear and feel your anxiety. And it is not possible for you to be glued to the TV and social media and hearing all the dreadful things and not cause them to be anxious. It's important also that you answer all of their questions. And when you're with them, ask them, what have you heard about Corona? What is it that you're thinking about with regards to it? Don't keep in mind that you want to know that it's age appropriate for them. And so you want to be able to listen to what they have to say. And even if it sounds silly, like, will the ice cream parlor that I usually go to, will that be there? Will it open up again? Because what might follow from that is grandma going to be okay? I heard something on the news about older people being vulnerable. Or, gee, I heard that something is happening with Corona and children. And basically going to answer their questions. And sometimes when you don't have the answer, you could say to them, you know, I don't have the answer to that, but as soon as I do, I'll let you know. And if you are upset about something you saw on the news, don't talk about it in front of them, or don't talk to them about anything until you gather yourself in the process. It's important to recognize that during this time, nobody is their best self. Not you, not anyone else. Someone made a comment the other day, and they said that the reason they didn't remember something, it was because they had a pandemic brain. And I have used that term. Well, okay, so this reaction is from a pandemic brain. And so it brings me to the next question about when you're living with someone. And so we know that being with someone, even if you like their company, if you're looking at them 24/7, you're going to find something that you don't like. And so it's important to be able to be gentle on yourself and on other people. And it's especially important that you are grateful to them for whatever it is that they are doing in your life. And it's important not to look at them with, are you a good partner? The question is, am I a good partner to you? Because in essence, the idea is that it's important that you are conscious about the fact that we are all in the same soup, that people are sensitive, that people are frustrated, that people are fearful, and also we are grieving. There's hardly anyone that doesn't know somebody that's died, isn't fearful that somebody might die. And most important, what we're grieving is the way of life that we have known. It's gone. We will need to learn to be flexible, and we need to be able to talk openly about how we're doing during this time. So in terms of choosing a therapist, as I mentioned, choosing a therapist is like choosing a mate. You don't take the first one that you interact with, and most therapists are now doing virtual work. So it's way easier to interview a few people. And in the resources that you'll be getting, there's a variety of different links that you can click on, and you read what they have to say, and then you ask them for a time to talk. And you might want to ask them for some Zoom time or FaceTime to talk, because you want to see how it feels to be with them. And in terms of mental health and older adults, oftentimes when I'm seeing my clients, and they will tell me about a mother or a grandmother or whoever it is that's in their life, and I'll say, gee, I'd like to meet them. And they'll say, oh no, they'd never go to a therapist. But guess what? It never fails that they come. And they come because I encourage them to say to their mother, their grandmother, their aunt, their friend, gee, I'd like you to come to the therapist, because the therapist wants to meet you to be able to understand our relationships some more. And so I often do that. I've had many people come to my office with wheelchairs and canes and lots of other stuff, and say at the end of the time, gee, I never would have thought that therapy would be like this. I don't know what they thought they might get when they came to my office, but they oftentimes feel as though, wow, you're not so bad after all. I'd like to, well, thank you. I'm delighted. And one of the things that Reverend Simpson said last Sunday was about the idea of it being important to bring your whole Black self. And so a part of the goal of this work is to be able to bring your whole Black self to whatever it is that you're doing. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing all of you around.
Thank you.